Audio Jungle.
Customer relationship management, configuration management if you happen to have custom configured products, quality management, service and lifecycle management should you have products that have service and warranty requirements, things like human capital management for your payroll and HR needs. So in addition to the common elements of an ERP package, Cloud Suite offers you a lot of additional peripheral applications that are often only offered as a third-party option for a lot of other ERP offerings. So the message here is that you can get a lot under a single umbrella, and it'll all be integrated in one suite. All right, let's jump right into the software. So the page you're looking at now, first of all, I wanted to mention that Cloud Suite can be deployed in a variety of options. You can deploy it as a software as a service option in a subscription model. It can be deployed on-premise as a perpetual license type model, or it can be kind of a hybrid of the two and be a hosted solution. So you have a lot of options in terms of your deployment. But as you'll notice, the screen I'm in right now, I'm in a standard browser. I happen to be sitting in Chrome right now. And that what that means is as long as you have access to the internet, you're going to have access to your Cloud Suite applications. The page I'm sitting on now, though, is called a user homepage or a role-based homepage. And what you're seeing here are a number of what we call widgets. And these widgets can be configured by the user depending on your specific needs. And in this case, I'm going to drive the demo from the screen that we're on today, and we're going to hit a variety of areas. We're going to start by looking at some navigational and user productivity features, but then we'll kind of take a tour through sales, CRM, purchasing, manufacturing, planning and execution, and then finally order fulfillment. So we'll kind of get a full life cycle view of the product. The homepage I'm on, as I said, is kind of menu-based. However, if I look at another homepage, and a user can have multiple homepages, here's an example of, I call this Dave's homepage with a menu widget, maybe some customer follow-up drill downs that I want to have here. I can have some metrics. These are there's hundreds of different metrics that I can apply to my homepage in kind of a dashboard style format. And I've got an item availability inquiry sitting down here on the right. If I look at another page, here's a more executive view of a kind of a portal style page that, as I come in the morning, maybe there's certain key metrics or key values that I like to see and kind of have that in your face view of those pieces of information. So it's giving you, the user, the capability of kind of configuring your page the way you want without having to have IT intervention. Give you an example of how simple it is to modify one of these pages. I'm on the home page we just looked at, or Dave's page, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, I'm going to edit this page, and I'm going to add a widget. So I'm going to click on Add Widget, and that pulls up our widget catalog that allows me to select from a variety of predefined widgets that are out there. And let's say, for example, I wanted to add a custom customer interactions widget. So that would be a widget that would allow me to see various correspondence I've had with my customers. I'm going to click Add, and we'll close out of here. And you'll notice that that's added that to the bottom of this panel. Now, if I were to save it at this point, that would appear down there, but maybe I want that up in the primary portion of this page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink my item availability widget down. Maybe I want this located at a different location on the page, so I'll drag that and drop it. When I'm done, I'll click Save, and now I have that interactions widget, as we see down here. It's going to refresh, and I can see all my customer interactions, and again, I could drill back into the details of any of that. So home pages give us the ability to personalize a page and have that information that I would most frequently use at my fingertips. All right, we'll talk a little bit now about some of the different views or forms that you're going to have within Cloud Suite and how you might navigate around them. The first being a 360-degree view form. And this is, I'm looking at a customer 360, but they're also available for items, for vendors, for employees, so your master data. And what they're allowing you to do is start at kind of a high level and drill back into the detail that you want. So in this case, if I wanted to search for a customer, I could do that. We'll just go ahead and use coordinate companies in this case. But you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, I have what we call accordion boxes. And these allow me to expand and contract various sections to look at related information. So in this case, if I went to payment history, I'm going to see a quick snapshot of payment history for this customer, or AR posted transactions. So here's all my invoicing activity for that customer. I might want to look at CRM or sales information. In CRM, I might want to go and investigate leads or opportunities. And we'll look at that as we go through the system, but this is more to kind of acquaint you with some of the navigation in these 360 style forms. Maybe I want to look at a customer order. Now, what you'll find in Cloud Suite in general, in all the forms we're in, if I do a right click on a value, say for example this customer order, and I click on details, that's going to drill right to the details of that specific, in this case, customer order. And maybe I want to see more details from here in terms of what was ordered on this particular customer order. Going back, I can certainly go to other areas, but again, the intent here is to kind of show you the navigation of what we call a 360 form, and that's the customer 360 form. The other type of form that we have in the system is what we call a multi-view form, and you're going to see a lot of these throughout the demo today in terms of giving you the ability to basically query or filter on any field on any screen. So let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm in a multi-view form right now, and I'm going to go to my family code, which is just a user-defined code in the system, and I'm going to search for all my valve family items. So I'm in the item master. So it's brought up a number of items in this display. Now on the left-hand side, I see what we call our collection of records. You'll see there's a splitter bar. If I can move that from side to side, or if I wanted to, I could just view this screen in the grid mode. Okay, I just hit a function key to allow me to see it in grid mode, and that's all the fields in the display. Or I could go back and see it in more of the form display mode, and I could use my tabs to get to the various pieces of information, as you see here. Now, when I focus on a record in the grid on the left, you're going to see the information display on the right. So if I were to change that to one of my other items, we see now I'm seeing a different item on the right. I could also use additional filtering, so I could filter on more than one field on the screen. In this case, I'm filtering on my valves, as we saw, but maybe I only want to see manufactured items. So I'm going to go to another field and say, just show me, every manufactured item in that valve category. All right, so we've got the records we want to work with at this point, and maybe I want to change a value or do something to affect this record. So let's just go and say, okay, I'm going to make this Rev2 and move out of that field. And what you're going to see in the left-hand side is this little gold diamond appears. That means that I've changed that record. Now I can continue to work, on other records by clicking on a different grid record on the left-hand side, or if I want, I can go over to my grid and I could change things more in a mass mode. So, I want this, fourth line, this 3/8 regulator valve to be a Rev3. So I'm going to make that Rev3, and I want this one to be a Rev3. And you're seeing, again, the gold diamonds appear on the left-hand side. I can also add records in mass. So if I wanted to go down to this grid and add, 4 or 5 different item master records or a series of item master records, I could simply go to an Excel spreadsheet of my items that I wanted to add, copy them, and I'm going to go up and I'm going to click Paste Rows Append. And we're going to paste that into the copy box. And what you're going to see is it's going to validate, and if everything is okay, in other words, if I haven't violated any of the user-defined codes or the values that Cloud Suite expected, I'll see the blue stars pop up, and that means at this point, if I were to hit save, I would save all those changes that we just made. Now, in my case, I'm going to refresh. I'm going to undo everything I just did, and we'll go back to where we started. All right. So very easy for a user to pull up information and be able to work with not just a record, but multiple records without having to leave this screen. Now, another thing I can do is I can use what we call the power buttons or the form links on the right-hand side over here, and that's going to allow me to get to related information. So, for example, if I wanted to see for this 1-inch back pressure regulator, I want to see the engineering workbench or bill of material for that. I'm going to click the button on the right-hand side, and that's going to open up another tab that shows me that information. But I've still got the items tab open over here, so I haven't closed that. Now, if I wanted to, and while we're here, let's just take a look at the bill of material. Here I've got my operations, and down at the bottom I've got my materials associated with those operations. And this is a nice utility in that I've also got all my other bills or sub-assemblies on the left-hand side that I can kind of drag and drop into that bill if I want to use those as templates for either creating or revising an existing bill of material. So you have some nice features there. Let's go back to the item master, and I'm going to choose a different item. Let's just go with the 987-1, and let's say I wanted to see availability information. So I'm going to pop that up. When I go back to my items form and I choose a different item, let's just choose the pressure reducing regulator, you're going to notice that when I go to item availability, that form's also changed as well. And that's what that form linking does for you. And you could have I could have 4, 5, 6 different forms open at the same time if I wanted. But because they're linked, I can kind of click on the record I want to work with and see that related information again without having to leave this screen. So the message here again is user productivity and giving your users the ability to kind of get to information and have it all presented in a single panel, or being able to maneuver between panels without having to re-inquire on that information over and over again. All right. I also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the productivity tools in the system. First being something we call Mingle Collaboration. And what this is allowing us to do is have an activity feed that displays not just messaging as we see here, but also allows me to follow what we call objects in the system. An object could be a sales order, it could be a purchase order, it might be a return. And any activity that happens on that object would display in this activity feed you see down the center of the screen. Now, in my case, I've got a couple messaging activities that have taken place. And at the top, we'll look at this one. I sent a message to Kirk Taylor. So he's going to see the exact same thing I'm seeing here. This is the message that was sent. And I wanted Kirk to review an item in the item master. Well, when I sent that message, I was sitting in the item master screen on this record. So I was on the valve that we were just looking at. But because Kirk gets this drill back link. And when I click on that, it takes him right to the record that I was reviewing. So that's a way of kind of directing people to information in the system and kind of melding your business processes with your data so that you can easily collaborate with each other internally and present that information. So think of it as almost like an electronic sticky note. You know, if you don't have that capability, you're probably going to put something in a mailbox, or you're going to have to go see somebody. Here you can kind of direct them electronically to that information. And that's something we call Mingle Collaboration. All right. The other feature we wanted to take a look at was Mingle context-sensitive information. So we're going to go back to our item screen, and I'm going to show you something called the context viewer. So let's go ahead and we'll pull up our valves again. You can see this little double arrow at the top right-hand portion of the screen. When I'm on a record that has related information associated with it, I'm going to see my posts that might be related to that, but I'm also going to see, and those are those activity feeds we just saw. I'm also going to see the Infor's integrated document management system start manifesting itself here, where I'm seeing a drawing that's associated with this item. If I go to a different item, I'll see different information. All right, it's because it is context sensitive. Now this isn't going to appear just in the item master. If I happen to be in a sales order or a purchase order that uses this item, I'm going to see this information as well. So I'm always going to have that context sensitive viewer capability on the right hand side of the screen. Now if I page through these, we'll see I've got 4 documents here, as well as some diagrams that I can get to. And if I wanted to see more detail on any one of those, I could simply click on that and drill into the details. So very simple to get to related information via that context sensitive feature. Now another, and where that's being fed from is the integrated document management system that's part of Infor OS. So I can go directly to document management as well without having to go through the context viewer and search for documents. So in this case, let's just go ahead and these are classified by attributes. So I'm going to search for a certain product category, and that's one of my attributes. I'm going to say product category is equal to VLV for my valves. And so that pulls up all the documentation in this case associated with my valves. Now, maybe I want a subset of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that portion of the query, but I'm going to say I want also to look at maybe functional area equal to engineering. So I'm going to type in ENG and do a search. So now I get a subset of that information. Once I've found the document that I want to investigate, I can click on that, and I could either pull the document up to view it, or I could start, looking at the history of this, because I can do, full check-in, check-out revisioning of this document, and I could look at a previous version. I could revert back to a previous version if we wanted to, or I could copy a previous version. So the document management utility gives you the ability, and this is the system that's feeding that context sensitive information we just saw, but it's giving you the ability to manage whatever types of documents you want and classify them and subclassify them by the attributes that we saw. All right, another feature of the system is integrated workflow management. Now, in interest of time, what I've done is I've created or I updated, I should say, a customer credit limit. So think of workflow management as giving you the ability to electronically either alert people to something that's happened or set up some type of an approval process. And that's what we've got here is more of an approval process where here's a kind of a flow of what's happening with this workflow. So I updated the customer credit limit. That sent a message to my credit manager. And if we look at that, okay, here's my Outlook, and it doesn't have to be Outlook. We've got an internal mailbox as well. But here's the message that had been sent, that Asperius credit had been updated from 1 million to 1.5 million. And in this case, I had to approve that. Now, I approved it, and that sent a message back to the originator, allowing them to know that that had been approved. So that whole process, what happens in the middle of that process is that the record gets suspended at a pending state. So it stays at the value that it was at, even though I made the change. And then once that approval takes place, it releases that to the new value. And those, there's a number, that's one of the standard workflows in the system. There's a number of other common workflows that are provided with the system, things like engineering change approvals and purchase requisition or purchase order approvals. But you have the tool as well to create any user-defined workflows that you need based on information that you want to track and maintain. All right, the last overview component I wanted to hit before we start delving into the actual functional areas is the capability of analytics and business intelligence through the burst offering that Infor has. So what we're looking at here is what we call a burst dashboard. And at the top of the dashboard, I'm seeing key performance metrics or key performance information and some trending. You see if I hover over the little graphs next to any of those values, you're seeing the yearly and quarterly breakdowns of, in this case, sales, cost of sales, profit, and profit margin percent. As we work down the dashboard, I'm seeing some graphics associated with this sales profitability analysis, things like sales by product line or by customer, by region, state, and rep. Again, some more graphics. And then at the bottom of the screen, I've got we call these dashlets, each of these components, and this is a detailed view of some of my sales and profitability information. And you can see some conditional formatting going on here, where if it's above a certain value, it's going to appear green with an arrow up. If it's below a certain value, we're going to see red with an arrow down. And if it's in the middle, I may see a little gold triangle. So I can set those values however I want on any of the fields that I want. Now, the nice thing with these though is they're multi-dimensional, and it doesn't have to be just Cloud Suite data. So I can pull data in from other sources and use it to do my analysis and combine it with my Cloud Suite data. But because it's multi-dimensional, I can start drilling into additional details here. So, for example, if I wanted to see, in the West, it looks like I've got 13.9 thousand in sales. I want to see which states I sold to and break it down by state. And within the state, I may want to break that down by rep and see that information. Now, as I do that, you're seeing all the key performance indicators change. So now it's based on West and California, as well as all the other graphics, and the table down below is only showing me, in this case, West and California. So the analytical capabilities of Burst kind of give you that ability, and this is just a dashboard I created with the existing data. You can configure and create those any way you see fit for whether it be for sales, for purchasing, or any of the applications. Here's another example. It would be like a vendor scorecard in purchasing, and I see Bentley Supply has a rejection rate of 20%. I want to see what were the items that were rejected. Okay, there's my spring clip, my collar ring, and my retaining clip. And I could start drilling into more detail in terms of vendor analysis in this case. So the sky's the limit. As long as you've got the data, you can pretty much produce the results you want and produce them in a very graphical and dynamic mode. All right, when I click original, it goes back to right where we started. So you can always get back to the base dashboard. All right, so let's take a look now at kind of walking through, and I'm going to start kind of from the standpoint of a lead, and we're going to work all the way through to the fulfillment of an order. But we'll start taking a look at some of the functional components of Cloud Suite ERP. So I'm going to start with some CRM information in kind of our sales and CRM area. So again, as I mentioned, it's fully integrated CRM, and in this case, I could start with a prospect. I'm going to look at some customer information. So a prospect would be someone I don't necessarily want to put in my customer master, but I want to work them as a lead or an opportunity or an estimate. But we're going to take a look because I've got some data out there I've set up for. And if I don't know the name of the customer, I could just do a wildcard type search. I'm putting in BOS in the description field, and here we found a lead where Boschko had some interest in our back pressure regulators. at the top of the screen, we're seeing some basic information in terms of being able to track things like campaigns and lead sources and statuses. So these are all user-defined type fields that we can add to our table. And at the bottom of the screen, I'm seeing the linkage as this lead gets worked into an opportunity, an estimate, and an order. I'm seeing that linkage down here at the bottom. So I've got lead number 194, which resulted in an opportunity. We see that, as it got a little warmer, it became an RFQ request for that back pressure regulator. It then turned into quote number 559, which eventually became order number 5363. So we're going to kind of walk through that process. Now, as I worked this lead, or as I spoke with my prospect or customer, I've tracked the interactions I've had with them. So if I click on the interactions, you're going to see that this started with a meeting at the Dallas trade show, and Cole Randall expressed some interest in this particular model pressure regulator. We'll see that after that, he sent me an email, which we see the body of down here. And by the way, I'm going to show you in a second how that came in from my Outlook email. So we've got full integration with Outlook, not just in terms of emails, but also contacts, tasks, and calendars. And then we submitted the quote to Cole. So this is the outgoing email, and eventually he accepted that. So let's take a look at that flow in Outlook. All right, so we're back in our Outlook box now, and I'm going to go to that email chain that we just looked at. I'm going to explain the yellow highlighting in just a second. Let's go ahead and drill into the email. So first of all, Outlook recognizes the fact that Cole is from Boschco, and it's displaying this information down here, showing me that these are all the orders that I've had in the past from Boschco, and we could get into more detail there. But on the right, we're also seeing all the correspondence I've had with them in the past. So if I go to that chain we just looked at, and we look at, there's my meeting. Okay, so there's the meeting, there's the RFQ request in the body of that email, and that all came directly from Outlook. So when I submitted that to track those interactions, the Outlook emails actually populated Cloud Suite with the email correspondence. Now go up and look at the top of the screen. What's also happened is Cloud Suite recognizes that is a Cloud Suite quote in the system, and this is a Cloud Suite item. And what that is what we call a smart link. So if I were to click on that, it's going to go right into Cloud Suite and show me in this case, quote 559. And from here, I could start working with that quote if I desire. So that smart link feature is nice in that it's giving me the ability to drill right back into the Cloud Suite system from Outlook. All right. So kind of see how we've had interactions with in this case, the customer. We've tracked all the correspondence, and if we wanted to, we could look at the kind of the steps that we went through to get to the point of the order. So it started with a lead. It then became an opportunity. So here's my opportunity, and you can see it came from lead 194. At this point, maybe I'm starting to track the tasks associated with that opportunity, or maybe I've got items that are associated with it that I want to associate with that, or my sales team members. So I'm starting to add information. Even though a lot of the information from the lead came over, I'm adding additional information as it becomes warmer. At that point, maybe it became an estimate. So we go and we've got full linkage to the estimate. And if I were to look at the general tab, you'll see that there's our linkage back to our lead and our opportunity. But now that I'm at the estimate stage, maybe I'm also tracking, again, there's some of my documentation. So I've got here's a copy of the quote that we sent to Cole. I may have information that Cole sent me as well. I may have a drawing or a diagram that if this was a custom product, Cole provided, and we've attached that as part of that record. Also got the capability of doing some pretty, we're not going to get into the details of estimating today, but some pretty detailed estimating in terms of being able to have kind of a sandbox environment and build up an estimate should this be a more custom type product that we want to estimate. In this case, I had an estimate worksheet that allowed me to break down a quantity of 1, 15, and 50, and it basically uses my what we call our estimate bill of material as a sandbox to create the cost and price information. All right, so at this point, as I mentioned, Cole had accepted it. We saw in the correspondence. So what I might do at that juncture is use my Mingle Collaboration that we saw earlier to notify my approver that we want to go ahead and convert this quote to an order. So as we saw earlier, we saw how I looked at the item. Well, let's go ahead and we'll look at the message I sent to, in this case, Jeff Smith, to convert quote 559 to an order. And again, I could attach documentation in this messaging, but the key here is when Jeff gets this, he has that drill back link directly to the quote. He can go into the quote or the estimate in this case and copy the quote to an order to convert it. And that, again, would create that linkage. And if I go back and look at that order, you're going to see that this estimate became order number 5363. And there's our linkage back to our lead and our opportunity. So we've got full linkage from the point we started talking to that customer, including all the correspondence, all the way through to the order. All right, now once the order is created, we're going to have some nice capabilities in Cloud Suite to manage that order. So here's our, we call this customer order quick entry, and this is basically the order that got created out of our CRM system, this order 5363. And what I can do now is things like, okay, I want to come up with a realistic promise date. Now, one of the key features of Cloud Suite is the ability to do something called capable to promise, and that uses our advanced planning and scheduling system to look at supply, demand, and capacity in order to project a potential delivery date. And so it's taking all my resources into consideration and projecting a date. Now, in this case, I happen to have 30. In fact, if I want to look, I can see that my availability, there's one of my power buttons, is a quantity of 30 at this point. So I've got 30 on hand. In this case, they want 20, and it's projecting that they can have those 20 by the date that they requested at 12/14 because I happen to have inventory. If I click Get CTP for that order, everything looks fine. If I click my Quantities button, I've got 20 available, and all should be well. However, another customer comes through, say, it could be anywhere from 5 seconds to 5 days later, and orders 20. Okay, so I'm looking at another order, 5371 now, and when I click Get CTP for them, because I've allocated those first 20, and they're due to be shipped on the 14th, it's now saying I can't promise this customer the 20 that they want until 1/8 of 2019. If I look at my quantities button here, I can promise 10 of the 20 they requested. But key here is when I click on the plan detail, it's going to show me exactly why it's going to take me that long to get that product to them. And in this case, I see I've got a long lead time component. This is basically a waterfall diagram of the operations and materials required to build this valve. And it's saying in this case that I've got this compression spring that has a 10-day lead time that's going to delay the start of that assembly. If I expand this, we'll see that I can't even start assembly until the 28th, in which case I can't ship the product until the 8th because I've got all my assembly operations that I've got to perform. Now, if I want to see that in kind of a collapse view, if I click on my critical path, there's the item that's causing the problem. The bold one at the bottom is causing my problem, and until I get that compression spring we're not going to be able to start that assembly. All right, and we'll see how that kind of manifests itself as we work through the manufacturing and material planning processes as well. All right, and that's real time. So we're you know, I'm not having to run anything. If I were to enter an order right now, it's going to take all those factors into consideration, and it's most likely going to delay because I haven't got those springs yet. It's going to delay that order that I entered, you know, 5 seconds ago. All right, talk a little bit about purchasing, planning, and receiving. So now that we've got some demand in the system, and demand can come from a variety of sources. It could come from orders, as we saw. It could come from safety stock. It could be forecast, and we've got a full forecasting system as well. But I'm going to have a planner's workbench that's going to allow me to see what the system says I need to do in terms of my buying activity. So in this case, I'm seeing a listing of items. This is all today's orders. I could review this week's or all orders. Okay, so in this case, today's and this week's are the same, but there's all my orders. If I want to sort this by, you know, maybe by release date, I can just double click on the column, and now I'm kind of sorting by release date. But here I'm seeing, you know, things like what's the lead time? Okay, when do I need to release it to have it due by the due date? What quantity do I need? And I'm also showing the vendor over here, as well as if I had a separate manufacturer requirement, I'll see that over here as well. Now, looking at the bottom of the screen, as I highlight an item, in this case, I'm on the half-inch fitting, I'll also see some notes on the vendor down here. Okay, in this case, one was a little bit higher price and one had good delivery performance typically. And then my price breaks by vendor. So I've kind of got all the visibility I need on a single screen to start making some decisions. But let's take a look at you know, I want to know why it's telling me to do some of the things it's telling me here in terms of buying these items. So first, we'll start simple, and we'll look at this 3/8 fitting, and I'm going to click on planning detail. Now, in this case, what it's showing me is I have none on hand right now. I'm sorry, I have 10 on hand right now, and I've got a safety stock level of 50. So right now, it's projecting that, or it's recommending that I need to have a planned order of 40 in order to get myself back up to safety stock. So that's a very simple example. Now, if I look at another one, there's our compression spring. Okay, that's the one we just saw that we had a shortage on in the customer order. I'll look at the planning detail for that. We're going to see that I don't have any of those on hand. I've got a receipt in this case, or I've got a planned order of 10, I should say, to satisfy that order we just looked at. So there's that demand, that customer order 5371 we just saw. So it's saying I need to get those in order to satisfy that demand. So I've got a nice view of you know, why is it telling me I need to buy the items on this list. All right. So once we've purchased items, we've created purchase orders, I can now start receiving. And I'm going to show you, we can receive in the Cloud Suite desktop if I wanted to. I'm going to show you our warehouse mobility solution. So this is going to allow us to do receiving via handheld device. So I can scan the barcodes and I can do everything in a mobile fashion. So to do a receipt, I'm just going to click on Get It. And I can receive direct to stock, or I can have a subsequent put away type transaction if I want. But in this case, I'm going to do a simple purchase receipt, and I'm going to scan my PO. So in my case, it's PO 42. And we're going to pull up the items on that PO, and I'll just go ahead and receive 10 of the first line. All right, so it's just confirming that this is the item in the purchase order. Now in this case, it's receiving to a location of dock, and then I may have a subsequent put away. I could receive direct to a location. I could receive to a container if I wanted to. Now in this case, I'm going to click receive, and we'll see that it confirms that receipt and allows me, if I desire, to print labels to actually put that product away. All right, we'll give it just a second. All right, and I'm going to say yes. I want to cross-dock that. Okay, this particular item actually was associated with a need on a work order. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to cross-dock that to that work order. So I don't actually put this one away. We're going to issue this to that work order. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll process that. And now that's going to be issued to WIP and go to that work order as opposed to being put away. So it saved me the need to put that item away and then go back and get it to pick at a later point. So here, if I were doing labels, here's where we would enter our label transaction. Okay. All right. So that's a simple receipt using our factory track warehouse mobility. Again, it's a fully integrated component of the Cloud Suite solution. Now, had I wanted to, I could have had a QC inspection and disposition process set up for that item. And in that case, I didn't have a item QC requirement, but if I did, I can start tracking things like tests and defects through the supplier inspection and disposition process. So here is an example of a receipt that was done, and I accepted all 5. Here's an example of one that was done where I rejected 2 and accepted 3, and if I wanted to see the tests that were performed, so in this case it happened to be a connector, we did a solder inspection and a continuity check, and we can see the values that were recorded as a result of that test. The final one that I received, I did an inspection. I accepted 4, and I put 1 on hold in an MRB or an MRR, material review status. And if we look at that, I can start tracking information like, what's the problem? What's the cause of that defect? What's the corrective action that we're going to perform? And I could launch a corrective action report at this point. So we've got full quality, and that process applies to both incoming inspection as well as in process or manufacturing type processes. So we've got full quality management and quality control functions embedded in the system. All right, the next step in the process is going to be to manufacture, produce the product. Now, we saw a glimpse of the bill of material earlier, so obviously that's going to be crucial in terms of production planning and execution. But we're going to jump to the planners, the production planners workbench, and I'm going to jump over, and actually this is the same utility, but we're going to look at it from a production standpoint that we just saw for material planning. And in this case, I'm seeing production order requirements that I can release. So, and by the way, to release from this workbench, I didn't mention it when I was in purchasing. We just click on generate orders and they get launched from the workbench. You don't have to go out and independently launch any of these orders. So here I'm looking at today's orders. Here's this week's, and here are all of our production order requirements. So again, it's looking at my demand, it's looking at my supply, and these are the manufacturing requirements I have. So this is kind of laying out my schedule for production. Now let's look at the item that we were kind of focused on earlier, and we'll look at the top line. Okay, so this is the item that the back pressure regulator that was on the 2 orders we looked at earlier, one that could be satisfied and one that was going to have a shortage. So if I look at the planning detail on that, I'm going to see in this case that there's my 30 on hand that we saw. Customer order 5363 that we saw earlier can be satisfied by inventory. So that's consuming 20 in inventory, leaving me 10 on hand. But I need to launch a planned production order in order to satisfy the demand for the other customer order. And we'll also see over here an exception message. So even though that it isn't late yet, it's going to show me that it's projecting it 18 days late based on my current situation. That has had to do with the compression spring that we were short on earlier. So at this point, if I wanted to, I could also look at maybe a demand summary. And what this allows us to do is kind of get a picture by item. Okay, so this is saying what orders are going to be affected by this, or what type of shortages might I have, or what type of conditions might I have associated with this particular item that I'm looking at. So in this case, it says everything's good. If I see check marks here where it says ready, everything's fine. However, I'm going to be 17.8 days late on customer order 5371. So it's saying based on the existing conditions, again, looking at supply, demand, capacity, it's saying I'm going to be 18 days late. All right, so some nice utilities to kind of analyze this information before I actually start launching or releasing these orders. But this is basically laying out my production schedule for me. Got some other tools we can look at in manufacturing, one being a load and capacity analysis. So I'm going to just say, let's just start from, in fact, let's start from the beginning of the month. And I'm going to say, let's look out 8 weeks. And basically what this is giving me the ability to do is kind of do an analysis of my resources or resource groups or work centers and see what the load is on any one of those areas. So in this case, I'm looking at my cutting resource group. Now, in my case, I set this up as a infinite resource. So that's why you're seeing utilization way over 100% in this case. If I click on my load profile, we're going to see that for the next couple weeks, I've got significant capacity issues because I've got these many hours available on each of my shifts. This is what's scheduled. This is what's planned, and I can also include forecasted hours. And so I'm over capacity for my next 2 periods. But it looks like I do have room downstream. So if I'm running in an infinite mode, I can do things like, apply additional resource or work overtime to manage that. And there'll be some work centers or some resources that you want to do that with. However, if we go back and we look at one of my finite scheduled resources, because we can do both, we can intermix finite and infinite resources. I'm going to look at my electrical group. And you'll see that nothing ever exceeds 100 in this case. And if I look at my profile there, you're seeing everything staying under 100%. And that's because I'm finite scheduling and it's pushing it forward as needed. So you can schedule in both a finite and an infinite mode. And it's a nice utility to kind of give you a picture of where you stand at any point in time. And I don't have to do it individually by resource or work center. I could look across the board and multiple resources. I'll also have a detailed scheduling capability, and what this is doing is we're seeing kind of a Gantt chart view, and I inquired on just my assembly operations in this case of all the work that's progressing through my shop, and the purple being downtime or weekends or maintenance or whatever it might be, and the green bars being my production orders that are running through the shop. So this is taking that plan, that production plan we saw earlier, and it's optimizing it to take into consideration things like, I want to combine common setups and things like that, where it's actually kind of tweaking that schedule to sequence things in the most optimal way. But what I can do here is I can say, okay, I want this particular production order to be reallocated. Looks like I've got some time maybe on another line that I could reallocate this. And what that's going to allow me to do is do drag and drop rescheduling of my plan. So nice intuitive type feature for your production planner to use in manipulating the schedule. All right, we talked about warehouse mobility. I'm going to talk a little bit about shop floor mobility now. So we saw how I could transact in the form of a receipt for warehouse type transactions. We're now going to look at the integrated factory track shop floor mobility capabilities. And what we're seeing here is Jeff Wallace is signed in, and this could be an iPad, it could be a kiosk, or it's basically touchscreen capable, so I can just tap on these. That's why you're seeing kind of the large icons here. But I can do things like time and attendance reporting, just basic clock in, clock out. You know, I could clock breaks and lunches. But where the real utility comes in is the ability to do some of my production reporting. So we won't go into issues and returns and moves, but I could certainly do any of these transactions from here. So that's given, in this case, Jeff the ability to go in and do that in a mobile fashion. If I go to my labor, one of the nice features here is I can go to this work center feature, and I'll see all the jobs that Jeff might be on, and he isn't on any at this point. But if we wanted to assign Jeff a job, we could simply go over to a job list in a work center. So I'm in my assembly center, and we could start working with any one of these jobs. So if I click Start Run, that's going to assign that to Jeff, and as he logs in or logs off until he clocks out of that job, he's going to see that popping up as what he's working on. We'll see over here how any one of these jobs, I can see in this case where 30 have been released, 5 are completed. I haven't scrapped any, but basically this is going to be a listing of those jobs that I'm responsible for, and allow me to allow me to transact on those. All right, we get a lot of other areas we could go into within the factory track shop floor, but basically this is giving you a manufacturing reporting or execution system in a mobile mode that you can deploy to the shop floor. A lot of other features where you can maintain, the employees can maintain notes and access the documents that we saw before through this utility as well. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is fulfillment. So we've seen how we've managed sales and CRM activity. We've procured material. We've manufactured items, and now we're going to go ahead and look at some of the shipping and picking and shipping processes. Now, we can do this a couple different ways. We can manage the picks on kind of a workbench utility, and I can say, for example, I want to see all my shipments or all my picks that are due to ship UPS, that are due, let's just say, after December 1st, and that are ready. So I'm going to say quantity ready greater than 0. So now I'm going to just pull up a list of orders. So this is everything that's ready to pick using that criteria I just mentioned. So I see a number of different customers. Well, maybe I only want to do it for a specific customer. So let's go ahead and refilter. We'll go ahead and we'll say just customer 1, and that other criteria is still intact. So what I can do here is I can start grouping these. I can say, okay, I only want, maybe I want these first 2 because it looks like, well, actually, let me sort by due date. So I want these first 2 rows to be picked. So I'm going to group those in a single group. And when I click generate, that's going to go ahead and generate a pick, and then we'll go on to confirm those items. So again, this is giving you utility. You can see the number of selections and columns we've got on this form to go in and kind of manage the way that I'm picking product, maybe based on carrier or zone or region or customer, and allow me to some flexibility in the way I'm picking product. Now, once I pick the product, I also have the ability to define my packaging or packing, and that's an optional function. You don't have to do that. You can go right from picking to shipping, but what the packing allows us to do is, I'm going to pull up one that I've already packed, is allows us to define the packaging configuration. So in this case, I had a small and a large box that I was going to pack 3 different products into. And you'll notice that the first line and the third line went into the large box, the package ID number 2, and we'll see that over here on the right. And the second line went into the small box. So I can establish my packaging configuration, and that all gets retained, as we'll see in a minute, to the shipment. So I've always got that visibility as to exactly how this particular shipment was packed. All right. So we've done a pick, we've done a pack, and I can also do everything I just showed you. We can also do through our warehouse mobility. So if I wanted to do a shipment, instead of going to the get it like we did before, I'd go to ship it, and I could do a simple pick and ship. Okay, so I can do that, and that would just immediately pick and ship the product, as opposed